Some nuclear wars are planned. Others almost started by accident. These are 7 moments when the world came within minutes of annihilation. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. October 1962. The United States discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. President Kennedy imposed a naval blockade. For 13 days, the world held its breath. But the closest moment did not happen in Washington or Moscow. It happened underwater. Soviet submarine B-59 was being tracked by U.S. destroyers near Cuba. American ships began dropping small practice depth charges to force it to surface. The submarine crew had no communication with Moscow. They did not know the explosions were warnings. Inside the vessel, temperatures were extreme. Carbon dioxide levels were rising. Captain Valentin Savitsky believed war might have already begun. The submarine carried a nuclear-tipped torpedo with destructive power comparable to the Hiroshima bomb. To launch it required agreement from 3 senior officers. 2 approved, 1 refused. Vasily Arkhipov argued there was no confirmed evidence of war. After intense debate, the captain backed down. The torpedo was never fired. If it had been, U.S. naval forces would likely have responded with nuclear weapons. Within hours, intercontinental ballistic missiles could have crossed the Atlantic. The world never knew how close it came. Stanislav Petrov Incident, 1983. September 26, 1983. Early warning satellites inside the Soviet Union detected what appeared to be a U.S. missile launch. Then another. Then more? The system reported 5 incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles. Protocol required immediate reporting up the chain of command. So a retaliatory strike could follow within minutes. The officer on duty was Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov. Something felt wrong. If the United States were launching a first strike, it would not send only 5 missiles. It would send hundreds. Petrov also knew the satellite system was new and not fully tested. He reported it as a false alarm. He was correct. Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds had fooled the satellite sensors. If Petrov had followed procedure without hesitation, Soviet leadership would have faced immense pressure to respond before impact confirmation. In the climate of 1983, already tense after NATO deployments and political hostility, the decision window was razor-thin. One officer chose doubt over doctrine. The missiles never existed. Able Archer, 83, 1983, November 1983. NATO conducted a command post exercise known as Able Archer 83. It simulated escalation from conventional war to nuclear release procedures. Communications were encrypted. Leadership participation was realistic. Even nuclear release codes were rehearsed. To NATO, it was routine training. To the Soviet Union, it looked different. Soviet intelligence feared the West might disguise a real first strike as an exercise. As Able Archer progressed, Moscow placed portions of its nuclear forces on heightened alert. Aircraft capable of carrying nuclear weapons were readied. Missile units prepared for possible launch orders. Western officials were unaware of how seriously the exercise was being interpreted. For several days, both sides operated in parallel, one believing it was training, the other suspecting imminent attack. No missiles launched. But historians later concluded that 1983 may have been the most dangerous year since 1962. Misinterpretation, not aggression, drove the escalation. When military simulations resemble real war too closely, perception becomes the threat. Goldsboro B-52 crash, 1961, January 1961. A U.S. B-52 bomber broke apart midair over Goldsboro, North Carolina. On board were 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs. Each carried a yield of approximately 3 to 4 megatons. As the aircraft disintegrated, both weapons fell toward the ground. One bomb deployed its parachute and descended relatively intact. The other impacted at high speed and partially buried itself in farmland. Subsequent investigation revealed something deeply unsettling. One of the bombs had completed nearly all of its arming sequence during descent. Its 5 separate safety mechanisms were designed to prevent accidental detonation. 4 failed. A single low-voltage switch prevented a nuclear explosion. Had that final safeguard not held, Detonation would have caused massive destruction and radioactive contamination across a large portion of the eastern United States. There was no enemy involvement, no political crisis, only mechanical failure and gravity. NORAD false alarm, 1979, November 9, 1979. Inside NORAD headquarters, warning screens suddenly displayed a massive Soviet missile launch, hundreds of incoming warheads. Command centers in the United States shifted instantly into crisis mode. Strategic bombers were prepared for takeoff. Missile crews moved toward launch readiness. The National Military Command Center began emergency procedures. In a real attack scenario, decision time would be measured in minutes. Before retaliatory orders were issued, operators cross-checked satellite and radar data. Those systems showed nothing. No launches, no heat signatures, no trajectories. The source of the alert was eventually identified. A training tape, designed to simulate a full-scale Soviet attack, had been mistakenly inserted into the live operational system. The computers reacted exactly as they were designed to. They just reacted to fiction. Had cross-verification failed or political tension been higher, leadership might have interpreted the data differently. Nuclear doctrine at the time emphasized rapid response to avoid losing missiles on the ground. Instead of war, it became a classified embarrassment. But the vulnerability was exposed. A rehearsal nearly triggered the real thing. So Norwegian rocket incident, 1995, January 25, 1995. A scientific rocket was launched from Norway to study the aurora borealis. Russia had been notified in advance. Somewhere in the system, the notification failed to reach critical operators. Russian early warning radar detected the rocket shortly after launch. Its trajectory resembled that of a U.S. submarine-launched ballistic missile. Analysts feared it could be an electromagnetic pulse strike designed to disable Russian command and control before a larger attack. For the first time in history, the Russian nuclear briefcase, known as the Cheget, was activated in response to a perceived threat. President Boris Yeltsin and senior military officials had minutes to decide whether to retaliate. As radar tracked the object further, its path moved away from Russian territory. The threat assessment was downgraded. No launch order was given. The rocket was purely scientific. The decision window closed without catastrophe. This occurred 4 years after the Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War was over. The missiles were still ready. 1962 Okinawa Missile Incident. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, U.S. forces worldwide were placed on high alert. On Okinawa, a U.S. missile unit operated Mace-B cruise missiles armed with nuclear warheads. In October 1962, the unit received coded launch orders. The authentication sequence appeared valid. Targets included locations inside the Soviet Union, China, and North Korea. Launch crews began preparation. But one officer noticed something inconsistent. The DEFCON level embedded in the message did not match the broader military posture. If nuclear war had officially begun, higher alert levels would have been declared across all commands. He ordered a delay. Verification requests were sent up the chain of command. The launch order was determined to be erroneous. The missiles remained on the ground. Had they been fired, escalation would have been immediate and irreversible. At the height of the Cuban confrontation, retaliation would almost certainly have followed. The crisis in Cuba nearly ignited war in the Pacific. A single procedural doubt prevented it. For years, nuclear weapons had been kept in the air, ready for immediate use. The strategy intended to prevent war also multiplied the opportunities for disaster. A radar reflection, a faulty chip, a misunderstood exercise, a single officer choosing hesitation over protocol. Nuclear war did not begin, not because the systems were flawless, but because, in those critical minutes, something stopped it. And next time, there may not be hesitation. History almost ended more than once. Which moment shocked you the most? Leave your thoughts below. If you want more real events told without exaggeration, subscribe and share this with someone who thinks nuclear war is just history.